Hey, San Fam!
A few days ago in church at the Sabbath school hour, which is like an hour where we study something from the Bible, then we were talking this time about stress. And it's a very relevant topic, I find, for me, because I've been dealing with a lot of stress throughout my life. And stress can cause all kinds of symptoms and sicknesses. And I do believe it might be more like behind the scenes for my different health issues than what I first have thought. So this is something I really want to work on in my personal life. And we had a very good, interesting conversation at the Sabbath school. So we just thought, well, we are like one of the most stressed generations that maybe have ever lived. So I know this is not only for us. So we thought, okay, let's share what we explored together and share it with you, so you can also hopefully find some helpful thoughts from the Sabbath school that we had.
Yeah, so we were reading this particular verse, and then we were unpacking it when Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I think it's a very beautiful, inspiring text from Jesus that probably you have heard before, maybe even memorized. But it's another thing to just to have it as an inspirational text from, okay, how do you apply that in your life on Monday morning when your child is not really listening to you, you're running late for something, you kind of feel stressed out, or you get an unexpected bill and you're like, oh no, how are we going to pay this? How are we going to take care of everything? And how do you apply in those situations this principle? How do you accept that invitation and experience rest for your souls? One of the first things that stood out to me is the position that Jesus invites us to. I think this is a very key part to understand, because this is the origin of much of the stress that we're experiencing. Jesus invites us to take his yoke upon us. Now, this is an illustration from back in the day, especially it's still used around the world, but less. Now we have tractors. There were two oxen and they were paired up with a yoke, with a wooden beam between them. And then together they were pulling this plow, for example, to go through the field and plow it. So this is the illustration, the picture that Jesus is giving us. Like, hey, I'm being one of these oxen, you stand next to me, and we'll be paired up and we go forward.
Teamwork.
Exactly. So the position that he invites us to is the position of a worker, of an ox. What we often do, and what is, I believe, the origin of much of our stress, is we don't take on that position. We take on the position of the farmer, of the overseer, the one who's supposed to be responsible for everything and have control over everything, the timing of when certain things happen, worries about the result. Is it going to bear fruit? Everything you need to do to try to increase the outcome, where are you going to sell it to, how are you going to protect it from certain weather, and just everything, all the outcome of the whole field. That is the responsibility, not for the worker, but for the one who owns the field. And I think much of what causes us stress is we try to be the overseer and try to control things that were never in our job description.
Yes. We take on burdens that were never ours to carry.
Which makes us heavy laden,
Yeah,
right? So it's
exactly.
not that, Jesus yoke, a yoke, am I being restricted to all these things? That's how you can think of it. But the thing is, the reality is we are heavy burdened. So it's either Jesus' yoke, which is light, or it's all kinds of other heavy burdens that we put on ourselves.
Yes, exactly. Where we get stressed out because we're trying to be in control over things we can't even be in control over, and we're never meant to. So, yeah, but something we talked about in the Sabbath school hour was this thing with that, okay, Jesus says that his burden is light, and that that just didn't seem to make sense to us because
It sounds nice, but
yeah, it sounds beautiful. I love it, and like, this is it's such a beautiful verse of like, teaming up with Jesus. But then we start thinking of it. But what does it mean? What does it actually mean that his burden was light? Because he had the whole burden of all the sins of the world on his shoulder.
doesn't seem very light.
That doesn't seem very light and like easy to carry. Well, he had so much hard circumstances in his life. I mean, he was tried on every side, and things he said made people just leave and even conspire to kill him. And he had all kinds of hard situations, but still he says that his burden was light. Like, okay, so how does this go together? And what we were talking about was that, and that I bring with me, is that, like, okay, I think that his burden was light because he had learned this principle of that let the overseer, let God the Father be in control over all the outcomes and consequences. And he was submitting to whatever his overseer was saying and just doing that with a full trust and faith in that the overseer has the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And he was not then, okay, if God says, go to this place and preach these things, he was not, but how is that going to go? What if they react negative? What if they react bad? Maybe they even want to kill me if I say this. Oh, maybe I should smoothen it down or do this or that. No, he didn't try to do that. He was just, okay, God has said this, I will do so. And then he rested in that.
Yeah.
He didn't work himself up with all kinds of things. He just fully submitted and trusted. So when Jesus says, come, walk next to me, learn from me. I mean, I find it so beautiful that Jesus, this is actually one of the main reasons why Jesus also came down to earth, both to save us, but also to show us a practical example of what he did in different hard circumstances so that we can learn from him and we can do the same. He came down to walk next to us so that we can have a practical example. And that's what he invites us to see, like, come, do like me and learn from me how to fully trust and submit to God the Father because he wants the best for you. He is good. Come, learn and trust that.
Yeah.
So I find that very, very encouraging and beautiful. And also this picture of that, okay, we walk next to Jesus. If you have two oxes and one is stronger than the other, well, he's carrying the heavier load. So it will be less for us. But like what you said, he still invites us to come and do the work. But we go with him, and he will the whole time be there carrying the heavier load and help us and point us to how to have that relationship with God the Father.
Yeah, because the truth is, it's not that he is like, come, all that are weary, or in this case, labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Just sit on the sideline and, take a vacation and I will do everything. Now, he's still inviting us to a journey, to work. There is still a certain responsibility that he places on us, a certain calling. There's a work for us to do. And it is hard work still. Though his burden is light, it's still hard work to go through that field because the responsibilities, we got to put in effort and it takes something. Both the hard work, but also the circumstances. Like what you said, we see the example of Jesus' own life. His life was full of, far from ideal circumstances that can absolutely stress you. And it's the same for us. Living in this world, it's very logical to be stressed because the world is broken and it puts us in all kinds of positions that we were never meant to experience. So it's a very logical reaction to feel stressed about these things. But Jesus is like, hey, it's hard work. Hey, it's a broken world. There will be very hard circumstances, but learn of me, look at my example. And that it really is a supernatural invitation to, despite all of those things, to be able to experience that rest and
peace
to be
in
like,
our soul.
to just be focused on what the oxen would be focused on. Just take your next step. Take your next step. Turn when the master tells you to turn. Just that. Just be faithful with what you are able to do, with what you are called. And the rest, hey, it's out of your hands. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to let it stress you. Trust God.
And the beautiful thing is then when taking just the next step, then eventually, like the overseer will have guided you to have plowed the whole field. So eventually it will be
Yes.
done. And I find also something very nice from the Bible study that we had. It's like that. It matters so much, like how you then go through these different circumstances, because like we said, Jesus had many hard things happening to him, but the way he faced it, like no matter how much you face in your life, if you succeed to have the peace in your soul, that's hugely different than if you are being like stressed up for everything. One person was sharing how he was in a storm in the United States. It was going to come a huge storm, and it was going to be a really terrible storm, and he was very stressed out and afraid, like how would he go with the house, and he thought that he would die in this storm. But then he was praying and he was surrendering to God, and eventually he succeeded to like, okay, all the outcomes, the consequences, they are up to you, God. I trust you. Whatever this will bring, whatever has happened,
I'm ready to die.
I'm ready. Yeah, I'm ready to die. And then he was filled with such a peace, and he said, "Oh wow." So even if he did all the things after he tried to protect the house, he went to a place where it would be safer and moved from that place when the storm would come there too. But he could have peace through that journey because he had entrusted all the consequences with God. And that's the same invitation that we have here to us to just really surrender. But that can be pretty hard, like in the moments. It's like this beautiful picture now when talking about it, and I think most of us can like agree to this logically, and yes, we understand it logically, but in the moment when you face something that is stressing you out, then it's hard to suddenly grasp all that logic. And something we talked about then in the Sabbath school was that, okay, when we face a moment where we are stressed out, try to take a pause and think, what is it that actually stresses me in this? Why am I so stressed for this? What are the underlying reasons? Because often we have a stress reaction that springs from a deeper root that can give stressors in many different areas. And when we then go down and find the root issue, then we can surrender that and experience more of this peace. Yesterday I was starting to write a document where I just wrote up different things that stresses me in different situations. And then I started taking like, okay, for example, I'm getting stressed out when we have a lot of things to do and I don't see how will I manage this. And then I try to think, okay, what is the reason why that stresses me out? Maybe I feel like if I don't manage this, I will feel like I have failed in my role as a wife or mom. And then it's like, okay, why does that matter? And then go one step deeper. If I feel that someone might be disappointed in me, and if go a step deeper, why is that an issue? Or then maybe down the line, like, people might not want to be with me and I get lonely. Okay, so if the core comes down to that you are afraid of being alone or lonely, then you can see, okay, surrender that to God and speak God's truth into your life. Okay, God says that He will not abandon you and He is your best friend. And so then you can speak some truth into trying to heal that core issue. And then in the different situations that happen, to remind yourself of, okay, why is this actually stressing me? And then remind yourself about, okay, God is with me. He will help me. He sees my efforts. And even if other people might not see all the efforts, God sees that I'm trying. And that's enough. I do not need other people to approve of it. I know that I'm trying my best. And God, He is with me and helping me. Like, so to try to speak comfort into your situation from built on biblical promises, that can be a practical way in the different situations to like calm your stress.
It's interesting with the example that you give. I think we so often just make life a lot harder than what it would need to be. Because in the example that you give, I think a very frequent example and many experience. But what you're doing in that process is like you're taking on the responsibility for a lot of circumstances, trying to control time, trying to control other people, how they perceive you. And you're trying to control all of these things that you cannot control. They're not in your hand. And instead, what God is just asking us to do is just do your best.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, be faithful. Don't be neglectful. Don't be lazy. Be faithful to the best what you can.
And trust
that's
God's
it.
love. Like, trust
Absolutely,
God's
that's-
love, because that, I think, is a core in, like, because we often try to, why we are stressed is because we maybe try to please other people, or we try to not end up in uncomfortable circumstances or so. But if we trust all those things around with that, also, like, okay, we try our best, and the rest is the consequences is in God's hands, and God will always be with us. He will always be on our side, and His love is enough for us. His acceptance is enough for us. We don't have to try to find it in other things, other situations. When we learn to find that in God, that's what Jesus did. Then we have come to Him, learn from Him to find all of that in God, and
such
that
a good
will
point.
be like, that will be the thing that keeps us from stress, because then suddenly we are not dependent on everything and everyone around us. We're just dependent on God, and He will always be by our side.
Yeah, we want to practice this. We actually want to take the time to analyze and to proactively work on being less stressed. Some other practical things, of course, also are don't take on more than what you can handle. You know, dare to say no to certain certain people or to your own ideas. So don't overload yourself with things. There are some practical things to just avoid situations that can be stress-inducing. But yeah, when you find yourself in that stress, take the time to reflect, to speak God's truth into it, and experience that rest for your soul. Hope that will be reality for you. Hope it will be for us too. We will see you next time on the Sandelin Sofa.